While function is always my first thought when it comes to setting up a new bullet journal, it also has to look nice, because if it doesn't, I'm not gonna use it. Marrying both form and function is something that I always try and do when setting up a new journal, and this one is no exception. Rather than going with a typical A5 size, I'm going with a B6, and that choice was also a functional one, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Rather than starting on the nerve-wracking nameplate page, I decided to flip to the first dot grid page and stick it to the inside card. While sometimes I do like to turn this page into a functional pocket that I can have at the front of my journal to store flat pieces of ephemera or stickers, or sometimes a year-at-a-glance calendar or similar, because in my last journal I found that I wasn't really using it all that much, it didn't seem necessary to set up in this one. One of the things that I like to do before starting a new journal setup is what I call a want analysis, where we look at the wins from the last journal, any aversions or things that I didn't like, any needs that I have for this new journal, and anything that I want to try. One of those aversions or things that didn't really work out was that front of journal pocket. Although I did use it to store things, I never flipped back to it to get the things out of the pocket, so it didn't really seem necessary to include it again in this one. There might be a time where the start of journal pocket comes back, but for now I'm giving it a miss. Instead, that means that when I open up the front of my journal, I'm going to flip to the first full dot grid spread, and this is prime journal real estate. When thinking about the sequencing of the pages that I'm going to set up, I'm very mindful that I want to make it so that the things that I'm going to reference the most at the start of my journal are as easy to access as possible. So given that this spread is very easily flipped to, I want to use it to house something that I'm going to turn to time and time again. Considering how I've used my previous journals, I know that this one is going to be best suited for a year at a glance, because I'll often flip to that page to see when certain dates fall, so that when I'm making plans or scheduling appointments or whatnot, I have it there as a handy reference. As said at the start though, if my journal doesn't look nice, I'm not going to use it. So while this is going to be a functional page, that doesn't mean that we don't get to put decoration in here as well. One of the main pieces of decoration that I used in this setup was this PET tape. I really appreciated the greenery of it and how I could use it to line the bottom third of the layout. Now, notably, given the size of the journal I'm using and the size of this tape, that doesn't leave a lot of real estate to fill with any kind of information, especially if you're writing directly into the notebook. Given this, I opted to use printable mini calendars rather than handwriting the numbers in for my year at a glance. Not only did this save me a hand cramp and a half trying to write out all of those little numbers, but it also means that I can stick the stickers on top of the decorative tape and have it peeking out on either side. I just made these ones in Microsoft Office using a table and just hiding the grid lines, and rather than printing it on regular paper, I printed it on sticker paper, which means that I didn't have to add any adhesive, I just had to cut them out, peel off the backing, and stick them in. In terms of the structures of the calendars, you can see we have 8 columns rather than just 7, and that's because that last column is for the week number. I like to number my yearly calendar from the first full week of the year, just so it gives me a better appreciation of the passage of time, because I find that, given the fact that all the months are different lengths and they start on different days of the week and all of that, saying something like September 17th doesn't give me a great appreciation of where in the year I am, whereas if we say something like week 38, then I can better appreciate how long I have left in the year, or how much of the year has passed. Another functional thing that I do in my planning, which very much helps with this perception of time, is what I call cyclic planning rather than monthly planning. Rather than setting up a new batch of layouts in my journal on a monthly basis, like a monthly calendar, monthly task list, habit trackers, that kind of thing, I instead do all of those on a cyclic basis or in 4-week blocks. Because a typical yearly calendar doesn't make it easy to see which cycle each day of the year falls in, I also decided to put in a quarterly calendar on that left-hand page. This one is set up so that each week is a row, typical to a regular calendar, and each column is a day of the week, but I also put in columns to specify the week number, that one being on the very right-hand side, and also which cycle and which week of the cycle each of those days falls in. That particular layout is very personal to me, but if you're doing cyclic planning, then it could also be useful for you. Knowing that the majority of external systems in my life runs on a typical month-by-month calendar, whereas I am running on a cyclic one, is why I have both of them on this spread here. In terms of timing though, from first to final touches, this one took about 10.5 minutes to set up, with that time certainly being decreased by having those printables to use, though of course the time doesn't include making the printables, but they didn't take all that long to make. If you want some printable mini calendars for your journal to make your next setup easier, then we do have a link in the description box to a set of free ones that you can just download and print off. But on this spread here, I decided that I wanted to cover the entire right-hand page with scrapbooking paper. This is a great way to get full page coverage that's kind of decorative, and then you can stick elements over the top of it. Whenever I do this, I try and use double-sided tape really close to the edge of the page because I don't want to accidentally mistake the scrapbooking paper for a separate page in the notebook and then try and rip the scrapbooking paper off the page that I've stuck it onto because there was like a slight gap or something that made it look like there were two separate pages there. But this spread is going to be used for my planning routines. I found that because I've been in a little bit of a journaling slump across the past 2.5 months, my previously established journaling routines haven't been serving me as well as I would like. I've at times even found getting into my journal just really difficult to do, and while I am coming out of that slump, for this next part of the year I want to focus on formalizing those routines so that I can approach each day and week and cycle as less of a scatterbrained mess. The left-hand side is going to be dedicated to outlining what my weekly and cyclic planning routines will be, whereas on the right-hand side, this is where I'm going to be breaking down my daily routine into 3 key time periods, that being the start of the day, the end of the workday, and the end of the day as a whole. In each of the sections I include on this layout, I'm just going to be specifying the individual steps that I'll take on those different frequencies to keep myself on top of everything I want to get done. You'll see that along with the scrapbooking paper, we have the addition of some new elements for my decoration, those being a couple of different tapes, one of them being another style of fence that I can run along the bottom of the page, and the other one featuring daisies. I thought this matched really nicely with the start of the journal, and while I don't typically try and make my start of journal setup match the journal itself, because I was feeling a little bit stumped as to what I could go with, daisies made for a good place to start and then build my theme from there. If you're ever wondering what start of journal theme you should go with, then maybe the journal itself could help inspire you. Otherwise, I know a lot of people tend to try and go quite minimalist because they want to pick something that feels a little bit more timeless, especially if you're going to be using this journal over a longer period. Typically, my journals will last me anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and given I'm using a smaller journal this time, I'm hoping it will last me 6 months, but we'll have to wait and see. As mentioned at the start of the video, I do consider my choice of a B6 for my journal to be a functional choice rather than just an arbitrary one. With recently feeling like I'm in a bit of a journaling slump and I was a little bit unenthused to get into my journal, one of the ways I like to tackle this is by trying something new. While I have used a B6 before, my last journal was an A5, which is the size that I most typically gravitate towards. Because things were feeling a little stale though and I wanted to change things up, moving to a B6 felt like a good idea. Along with this, because I've moved to a more streamlined approach when it comes to my monthly or cyclic setups, I'm not setting up as many individual layouts when I go to put those ones into my notebooks, meaning I don't necessarily need as many pages as I have previously. Because the B6 is not only smaller in size but also has fewer pages, opting for a B6 over an A5 seemed to make more sense. The third reason that I went with a B6 though may at face value not really seem like a functional reason, especially considering the main reason is decoration. I do consider decoration to be a functional thing in my journal though, because its function is to incentivize me to use my journal. By making my journal look nice, or at least nice by my standards, it makes it a more enjoyable place to get into. In terms of how this relates to a B6 though, the last time I used a B6 was probably a time in my journal that I felt most creative. While I have done layouts since then in other sizes of journals and still done them in a way that felt creative and was decorative and made me enthused to get into my notebook, the setups that I did in that B6 have a very special place in my heart. I just found that having the decreased amount of real estate on the page made decorating the pages feel more manageable. Yes, of course, you do have to balance this with the functional stuff that is the information you want to include on the pages, but it's really that approachability of the smaller size of the page which makes me enjoy this notebook size for creative but productive journaling. At this stage though, I'm just hoping that the smaller page sizes and the smaller page count isn't gonna make me fill up this notebook too quickly. But I'm feeling optimistic at this stage at least. In terms of timing, this spread took about 18.5 minutes to set up, but I'll also need some time later to go and populate this layout. We're not doing that at the moment though. Instead, I wanted to further my routine related layouts and set up a space for an ideal week. I do feel that if we're not paying attention to our routines, they kind of just build themselves and don't necessarily build themselves in the best way possible. While I have kept a pretty similar weekly routine for the past 3 or so years, I started thinking a little bit more critically about it, and I don't think it's serving me as well as it could. One particular concern I have related to this is about energy cycles, and about what tasks I'm doing at what points in the week, and whether this is best utilizing the amount of energy that I have. For instance, one of the things that I've noticed is that my mental energy is usually the lowest on Thursday, and Thursday seems to be the day that I want to make a whole bunch of critical decisions about editing my videos, which is not only a task I don't particularly enjoy, but also a task that requires my mental energy to be higher. While that was the initial issue that I noticed, it also got me thinking about when I do other tasks during the week. So when are my typical laundry days? When am I typically trying to film these videos? When am I releasing different pieces of content? When am I actively trying to work on my goals? I've essentially decided that I want to burn it all to the ground and just start again from scratch, really thinking about those energy cycles that I have across any week or any day, and when is going to be the best time to do the things that I want to get done on a regular basis. This layout has two halves. On the left-hand side, we have the timeline or schedule, where I effectively want to have a rough weekly schedule or an ideal weekly schedule from the hours of 7 AM to 8 PM. That's not to say that things don't happen before or after those times, but I want to focus on those hours in particular. On the right-hand side though, this is where I'm going to be listing day-specific tasks, and which days I intend on doing them on. These could be things like video releases, when I'm doing my laundry, when other pieces of content come out, for instance membership perks or newsletters. They're the kind of things that won't be easily captured on the weekly timeline that we've got on the left, and I also want to make sure I'm spacing them out across the week so I'm not doing everything all at once on a Monday or something like that. Those ones I'm going to be organizing in a table format where we have the day that I'm going to be doing the task running down the left-hand side, and then the task itself in the right-hand column. In terms of timing, this one took about 6.5 minutes, though that time doesn't include sticking in the background piece of paper that we have on the right-hand side. So probably a little bit closer to 8. Flipping over though, another area of my life that I want to be able to organize with this start of journal setup is connection time with my partner. While on previous iterations of a layout like this one, I had spaces to jot down ideas for dates that we could do, what I think is actually going to be more helpful is writing down a log of when our dates were and what we did on them. Mainly just to hold us accountable to taking more of them. We have certainly been better this year compared to previous years with getting out and doing things together, but it's something that we both want to work on, so I figured that having a dedicated spot for it in my start of journal setup was going to be a good way to honor that goal. There are going to be 3 main sections on this spread, one of them for things that we want to watch together, whether they're movies or TV shows, one for things that we want to do together, so activities or outings that are on our radar, and then the entire of the right-hand page is going to be a date log. In that one I'll be recording the week number, the date in terms of September 17th or whatever day we were working with before, and then beside that I'll write down what we actually got up to. Of course, I could have just set this one up very simply, so putting in a dividing line down the middle of the page on the left hand side and drawing in a simple table on the right, but just like every other layout in this setup, I wanted it to look nice, I wanted it to have some decoration, so I also included some tape along the top and the bottom. When it comes to doing setup in my journals that I like the look of, one of the things that's really important for me is cohesivity. So making the layouts all look like they belong together, they've got matching elements, repeated pieces that you use throughout each of the pages, so they all tie together nicely. Along with the tape and paper decorations, another repeated element that I used was the lettering. And I liked the idea of this being a style that looks like it's been punched out with one of those hand punching label makers, but I didn't want to have to go and buy one of those and then punch all of the letters out myself. So instead, I just found a font online, typed all my headers up, printed them off and stuck them in. The specific font that I went with, along with all of the other pieces that I used for decoration, is listed in the description box if you were curious. To get table headers to line up exactly where I wanted them to, I just built the table in Microsoft Word, merging boxes so that then I could get the headers central, and because the size I used on the document was the exact size I was going to have in my journal, when I printed them off to size, they fit perfectly. Printed headers in general are something I'm really enjoying using in my journal because it makes it so that you can use essentially any font you want, but you don't have to spend the time, effort, energy trying to recreate that yourself. Sure, I could totally have done these by hand, I could have gotten out a white gel pen, used some black paper, but to get the overall finish that I wanted and the consistency in the lettering, it made a lot more sense to just print them off and stick them in. Plus, while this is just a simple kind of all caps lettering with some smudging to give you that overall effect, Other styles of lettering are not so simple, not so straightforward, and would take much longer to do. For those kind of lettering styles, the print and stick trick is definitely a favorite. For me, the most challenging part is making sure that I've considered all of the headings that I need before I do the printing, so I'm not wasting my sticker paper or regular paper. This time around, I definitely did a worse job of it than I have previously. As for timing, this spread took about 10.5 minutes, and then the next spread is all to do with family time. Since my parents moved back to New Zealand, I have been actively trying to make sure that I see them regularly, and while I was doing a really good job of that at the start of the year, in the last 2.5 months when I've been having not only my journaling slump, but I guess maybe just a general slump, I haven't been doing as well as I had. The structure of the main writing spaces that we're going to have on this layout are going to be pretty similar to what we had for the date night log, but rather than being for date nights, they're going to be for family time. Obviously, the entire of the spread is already covered in scrapbooking paper, so to have space to write, I needed to stick in some more paper on top of this, but I thought it also just added to the decorativeness and the novelty of the layout, which is exactly what I'm looking for in this setup. The paper that I'm sticking in for these tables just comes from an art journal of Notepad that I have from a previous subscription box, so it isn't actually available anymore, but it is the kind of table that you could either make on your computer and print off and stick in, or if you felt so inclined, you probably could also just rule it up yourself. I do appreciate the Notepad though for making the time taken lesser, because after sticking in the scrapbooking paper, the rest of this layout only took about 4.5 minutes. I think this layout is one that really highlights the importance of considering what you want your journal to help you do, or what you want it to help you achieve. Not many people have a family time log in their journal, or at least not many people I've seen in terms of their journal setups, but because this is something important to me and because it's something that I want to work on and build regular routines around, having a space in my journal dedicated to that and holding me accountable to spending time with my family, these are the kind of things that when we build them into our journals, it means that the journal is not only better tailored to our needs, but also is just going to be more functional for us too. Whenever I'm planning a new setup, I try and dedicate a decent amount of time to just that forethought, considering what I'm struggling with, what I need my journal to help me with, and thus what kind of layouts could I include to assist in this. The next layout is very much the same, so rather than thinking about family time, which is something I want to do more of, this is thinking about my social time and my leisure time. I'm the type of person who, if I'm not careful about it, will very easily fill up all of my time with work. In part, this is because I enjoy what I do, but it means that I'm also very much at risk of not getting the rest and recuperation that I need to be able to perform at my best. If you find that you're kind of the same and you don't take the time for yourself that you need to, then it's good to consider what you could include in your journal to help hold you accountable to taking that time to yourself. The layout that's going to help me with that is the one that I'll be putting on the right hand side. That one is going to be my day off log, so writing down what week number was the day off in, what date was the day off, and what did I do as part of it. While I want it to be time off, I still want it to be intentional, things that add fun and joy and novelty to my life, not just sitting there scrolling my phone on Instagram for the better part of a day because I didn't know what to do with my time. I'm not out here trying to vilify social media or anything. I feel like that would be slightly detrimental to my job if I did that, but I want to make sure that I'm filling my days off with activities that are genuinely cup-filling, not just tasks that I defaulted to, like scrolling reels. On the left hand side though, this one is getting the title of Bujo Wednesday, because this is the schedule for our Bujo Wednesday hangouts. If you don't know what that is, effectively once per week, on a Wednesday, funnily enough, my friends and I aim to meet up so that we can hang out, do work in our journals, just chill. We go over to somebody's house, they make dinner for us, and then the next week we go to a different friend's house, and then the next week they'll come to mine. We try and do it so it's on a regular rotation, though it really depends on who can make it on any given week. So I like to have a space to note down what is the week number, who is there, and what do we have for dinner. While I do enjoy cooking for my friends, I also like to try and make sure that I'm not cooking the same thing for them every single time they come over. So having a record of what meals we had at theirs and what meals we've had at mine is just helpful for keeping up that novelty. Obviously, that's not necessarily a layout that everybody needs, but maybe you could start a Bujo Wednesday style hangout with your friends. While we do call it Bujo Wednesday, there's actually no requirement to just be bullet journaling. Really, it's just an excuse to hang out with each other. But especially when life can get as busy as it is, it's nice to have that kind of standing appointment to see the people I care about. These two layouts combined took about 16 minutes to set up, though probably closer to 18 because I did go and stick in that piece of scrapbooking paper on the right hand side before we got into filming this part of the setup. I did also find that with the pieces I was sticking in on the right hand side, I had to pull them up and stick them back down a couple of times, just because I get a little bit particular about their placements because I'm a bit of a persnickety biscuit when it comes to my journal. Another element that I used throughout the setup that not only helped to tie the layouts together and make things look cohesive, but also adds some more function and decoration to the layouts is the second line highlights. I consider this to be decorative because it does add some more color to the page and some more visual interest, but it is also functional because oftentimes it makes the lists more readable, especially when you're scanning your eyes down a list and you want to look at separate entries. Having those second line highlights can help you find your place, help you read across from numbers in a table easier, and also can make a long list read less like a large chunk of text. I've used them on both the pages of this spread, but also on our previous ones like the planning routines layout and the spread related to time with my partner. Flipping on over and just ignoring the fact that we're skipping a spread here, we'll go back to it, don't worry, but the spread that we land on is going to be another one where I use those second line highlights, this time just on the right hand side though. In the idea of making this journal as functional for me as possible, I needed to have a space dedicated to meal prep, because that's something that I've been actively trying to work on this year. And so far, I think I'm doing quite well. The type of meal prep that I tend to do is preparing full meals. So on a Sunday afternoon, I try and prepare my breakfasts and my lunches for the full next week. Not only have I found that this has helped me eat much better, it's also incentivized me to try some new recipes, which has been fun too. While I haven't necessarily meal prepped every single week of the year so far, I have done 21 out of 25 weeks, and the ones that I didn't do were either because I was sick, or we were away on holiday, or I had leftovers. The right hand side of the layout is where I'm going to be writing down what meals I've been preparing for the breakfasts and lunches, whereas on the left hand side, I want to have a log of any recipes that I've tried that are new to me. These are layouts that I'm bringing over from my last journal setup, and while I did well to use the meal log, I wasn't as consistent with the new recipes spot, so I figured that having fewer lines to fill on that space was probably for the best. Rather than putting in a box with second line highlights, I just decided to again use one of those notepad pieces. It still has 15 spots to write down new recipes, so it should last me for the lifetime of this journal. That being said though, I am definitely still on the hunt for more recipes, and I'd like to try more in the second half of the year, only because for lunches in particular, I definitely find myself defaulting to the same things over and over again, and because they're meals I like, I don't want to eat them too often because I'm worried that I'm going to get bored of them. If you have any recommendations for make-ahead lunches that I could explore, I would love to hear about them. Feel free to drop any recommendations in the comments, because while I do love my tangy tomato chicken with roast vegetables, having it for every lunch for 3 weeks in a row is probably enough, and I could certainly do with trying something new. Now, despite all of my very good pre-planning in my journal setup, this layout actually almost didn't happen. Somewhere between writing out the list of layouts I wanted to include and planning the order they were going to go in, I managed to leave this one off completely, which is why we originally skipped the spread that came between this one and the last one we set up. Because I had accidentally left it out, I did and ah about whether I wanted to include it in the video, but it is something that makes my journal more functional or more useful for me. So if I'm showing you specifically how I make my journal functional, it really did need to be included. In terms of timing though, the spread took about 12 minutes after sticking in that scrapbooking paper, and now we can flip back to the layout that got set up prior to this one, which is a space to plan my next journal setup. So not this one, but the journal that's going to come after it. It does feel very strange to even be talking about my next journal when I haven't even really started using this one, but this is going to be a spot for me to do that want analysis that we talked about at the start. So thinking about the wins from this journal, any aversions or things that didn't work, my needs for my next journal and anything I want to try, and because I'm going to have this space pre-set up from the get-go, it means that I can jot things down throughout the life of this notebook. You know how they say there's a first time for everything? Well, this was the first time that I had a genuine issue with my current filming setup. I'm not too sure why, but the footage decided to corrupt partway through filming it, so this is actually all of the setup of this spread that I got. That means that I can't give you a great estimate of how long it took to set up the page, but given its simplicity compared to other layouts, probably not all that long. maybe about 6 minutes. The right hand side I've left open so that I can draw in little thumbnails of the layouts that I'm going to set up in my next new journal setup. But now it's time to give some attention to the nameplate page. Whenever I'm feeling nervous to get started in a journal, I tend to leave this space to last because it's the very first thing in the notebook. And so it always feels a little bit daunting. I want to make sure that I don't stuff it up. And so to take the pressure off myself, I just decided to do it last. Rather than just write my name in, I decided to make the layout a little bit more decorative, keeping with the theme that I had for the start of journal setup. So using that brick wall tape, using the same lettering style, and a couple of the other decorative pieces. I thought it would be a cute detail to add the date range that this journal is hopefully gonna last over, and now as I've stuck that into the notebook, I feel like I have to keep to it, though of course I could just stick another sticker over the top if that date range doesn't quite hold. I will end up adding some sticky notes to the inside cover, usually to use as a shopping list. This is another functional detail that I like to add to my journal, but flipping through so that we can have a look at all of the layouts we set up, despite pages not being quite in the order I wanted them to, because I initially forgot that meal planning space, I'm really excited to use these layouts, and I'm looking forward to how they help me with my goals, the things I want to work on, and just helping me strive for that balanced but productive life that I'm aiming for. Before your next journal setup, I do very much encourage you to do a want analysis. Whether it's a full new journal or just a new monthly setup, it can be so super helpful for clarifying what you want to put into your notebook to help you get where you want to go. If you wanted some guidance on how to do that though, the video on screen is the next one to check out. In that one we go through each of the stages and some questions you can ask yourself to help you with your analysis. So click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.